Okay, today's Photoshop discussion will be about images, mostly photographs, how to color correct photos, how to resize them, and everything you should have learned about Photoshop um, in the photography class within this one video. No, I'm just kidding. I started here at the Orchard Supply website because I want to just talk about images and images you see on an app or on a web page. For example, you're looking at this, I just went to Orchard Supply, osh.com, and of course I got this ad popping up right here telling me I can get $5 off a purchase of $25 or more if I want to sign up for their email list. But one of the things you'll notice here is that we have, of course, a photo here, and an image here, and an image here. And so, most likely when images are taken, they're not correct the first time, and you're going to have to color correct. In fact, I color correct almost every one of my pictures. So today I'm going to talk about color correcting, straightening, and so on. In addition, depending upon, what you're looking at, these are all specific sizes. If you look, this is probably, 300 pixels by 300 pixels, 300 pixels across by 350 pixels high. How do I make my images fit within a certain window? Okay, so we're going to talk about cropping and making images specific sizes. Okay, so again, we measure most of our images inside of Photoshop, or at least on a website, in pixels. Okay, so these are in pixels, and so I'm going to talk a lot about that. Even if we go and look at a, let's look at some images. You'll notice there's a little image right here. What size is that image? Okay, there's a little image here. What size is that image? Okay, so we're going to talk about making specific sizes for images. And then here's another size. If I click the view, it gives me a larger size, which this isn't a very good photo. It's kind of blurry. It looks like they took this image and just blew it up, which is kind of a mistake on my websites, or at least on the ones that I work with. I do a lot of work with Amazon. We tend to use a very high resolution image so that when they do zoom up like this, it still looks sharp. This is kind of a mistake, kind of being blurry ladder. Maybe one of you can apply it, Orchard Supply, and make their website better. Okay, so let's get into Photoshop again. We're mostly looking at images and how to size images and how to color correct them. I have a big folder. I'm going to close this because I don't want Orchard Supply. Let me close this. I have a folder with images. We're just going to talk real quick here about some of them and do some of them. Of course, we have a basic photo that we take. I'm going to open it in Photoshop. And so this is a typical landscape. One of the, probably the color correcting that you would do a lot inside of Photoshop is correcting things that are either overexposed or underexposed. At least in this image right now, the camera exposed, of course, for the ground and not the sky. And so the sky has been what we would call washed out, where you're missing a lot of the detail up here because the camera was exposing for down here and the color for the green trees. So probably the main one that I use mostly for this would be under Image Adjustments, is where most of your color correcting and contrast or exposure and things like that. Of course, if you just look at exposure, I said I use this term already, that the camera exposed for the ground and not the sky. So if we go to the exposure setting here, you'll notice you have a couple different options. I'm not going to get into the gamma correction and all that, but exposure means I'm going to increase the exposure, you can see what happens there, or decrease the exposure, you can see what happened there. And so, if the more exposure, you'll see, oh, look at the sky getting washed out even more and more. So depending upon the camera that you're using, what is the quality of the camera. Most likely, if you're doing landscapes, the camera is really going to be frustrated with being able to expose for the sky or the ground. So in order to fix this sky, I probably would go underneath Edit Adjustments. I would either use Levels, Curves, or Highlight and Shadow. These are the ones I probably use the most. Levels, Curves, Highlight, and Shadow. So let's start with levels right now. Again, when you're using a color correcting, you're looking at adjustment. What am I adjusting? I'm adjusting either the dark points, mid points, or the light points, and that's sort of what you're looking at when you're looking at levels here. You'll see I have black on this side, so if I want to make the blacks blacker, I can take the triangle that is here and go to the right, and you can see how the darks are getting darker. Okay, if I want to take the midtones and make them lighter, I would take the midtones and go to the right or left. You can see as I go to the left, you see the sky starts coming up because I'm taking where the midtones are and adjusting their exposure. And then of course the light areas are this one here. Okay, this triangle at the very end here. Now you'll notice I can do a before and after. I can say before, after, before, after. Now I'm getting a little bit of sky, but that's not very good. Plus, it's messing up the ground now. So, you know, landscapes are very difficult to deal with. That's why we usually use masks and things like that. What I would do is probably cut out the ground and adjust the sky separately than the ground when I'm doing adjustments. And there's ways of doing that, and I'm sure the Photoshop class can teach you that, or you know, I could go over it later if you want, maybe, but not right now. The other one I might use is called shadow and highlight. And how that one works is that you'll notice there's a shadow amount. So do you want the shadows to have more detail? You can see you can bring detail out. Or do you want the highlights to have more detail? Notice how when I go to the highlight, you can see the sky changing here. See how the sky is adjusting? And you see before, after. Now I'm starting getting detail. So what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the highlights, which is, you know, this is the bright area. So I'm adjusting that. But notice how it adjusts the ground as well. So again, if you are using Photoshop to do a landscape adjustment, probably the best way to do it is to do something, call it a mask, where you use a mask to block one area and then adjust the other area. That's a different lesson for today. This is color correcting and so on. Let me upload another image. So you can see landscapes are really rather difficult. Here's another common image that you'll have a dark image, right? We have a skateboarding kid here, and he's awful dark, and we want to brighten him up. The problem is, of course, once we brighten this image up, the background is going to get kind of blown out. You could see some detail in the background, but this is a really dark image. So how can I fix that one? Again, probably the one I use mostly is levels. I would go under Image, Adjustment, Levels. Oh, that was curves. Let's not go there yet. Image Adjustment, Levels. And again, you'll notice in here, this is called the histogram, this kind of bar that you see here, this little chart looking thing here. Again, the darks are over here and the lights are up here. You'll notice that most of the histogram, or the area that you see in this chart here, is mostly towards the dark level, because most of the pixels in this image are in the dark range. That's why it's kind of over here. I can click on the triangles and kind of move them, and as I'm moving them, you'll see how he is starting to brighten up. Okay, so we can almost get him where he's a visible person. The downfall, though, is of course the background is being blown out or brightened up also. Okay, so that's one way of going about it, and you know, at least we can see the person now. So that's not a bad one. Again, that was levels, or yeah. And then the other one is, of course, I want to talk about is curves in this case. Curves is similar to the levels, and I just need to move it around here, in that, you know, you have lights on this side and darks on this side, and you can see the dark areas are dominant. This again is, it's called a histogram, this kind of chart that you're looking at here. So if I was going to brighten this up, you'll see I have a line that goes down the middle here, and this line that goes down the middle represents kind of a graph of the image. So if I want the darks, because it's really dark, I want it to be lighter, I want to lighten this up, I'm going to take and put a dot by clicking on the line that goes down this curves, and I'm going to drag up like this. I'm going to adjust the curve, and you can see how he is starting to come out. Okay, kind of like the levels, a little bit better. I think it has a little bit more detail. You can see how you can adjust. And this is called curves, and curves have been around. Boy, that was the first color correcting tool I was ever using, was called curves. Back in 1989 is when I started using curves like this, and it was a lot of challenge to learn how to use it properly. You just need to work with it, try the different settings, turn things on and off, and there's even options here that allow you to do even more fine detail. Okay, so it's called curves. and it's a great way to lighten up a dark photo, either levels or curves. Those are the ones I usually. The exposure really doesn't work as well as these ones because you can fine tune them where the exposure's overall. Okay, so those are ones I use a lot. Let's work with another image. These are just photos. You're gonna be faced with having to fix photos. So here's another one. Let's just say this is from Phil's Fish Market over in Moss Landing. And let's say I was gonna work on this image and Phil says, I love this picture of these catfish. I want to put it on my website, but of course it's kind of dark and ugly right now. So how can we fix this image and maybe make it a little bit better for Phil's website? Well, probably the first thing I would do is, again, adjustments. Go under image adjustments. You can use your levels. Again, you'll see that this is called a histogram. I might brighten up. Okay, you can see just brighten up. Now I can start seeing the fish. You can see before and after. There's a little preview right there. Now I can start seeing some detail in the fish. Okay, I don't want to do the brightness, the white part. I'm just the middle one because you can see how it's getting kind of blown out there where it's overexposed. And then of course this is kind of tilted a little bit, so I'm gonna maybe rotate it a little bit. Let's brighten it up a little bit more. I might go and try the shadow and highlights, and you can see I'm getting a lot more detail. I don't like to do too much shadow, but you can see before and after, before and after. In the highlights, this will bring out some detail in the ice right there. See that? That's a little bit too much. I like so you see before and after. So again, under shadow, there's a little triangle. I can turn it. Usually it starts way up here. I turn it down a little bit because if I don't want too much. And then the highlight sort of starts down here. And I move the triangle up a little bit to give me some detail in the highlights. So these are the ones, and I usually don't mess with the adjustment, the color adjustment here. I don't really know how to use that. But I know enough color correcting to get me through, making images quality for at least a web page. And then the last thing I might do is rotate it. There is a rotation tool. Maybe not. We'll do another rotation a little bit later. But that looks a lot better. Okay, that looks a lot better. Probably get rid of this ugly board in the back maybe, and just crop this image around. Some of the fish heads are getting cut off here too, so that doesn't look very nice. But it was a start. It was a start. I'd probably take a better picture next time. How about that? Okay, so those are color correcting ones that I usually use on every picture that I ever taken. So let's talk about some other things. Let's talk about straightening an image. So let's open up this lighthouse. And so we're going to look at this lighthouse, and if we zoom in on this lighthouse, you see it's kind of blurry photo, so it's not very good. But you'll notice that that lighthouse is a little bit on an angle. It looks like it's going to fall over into the ocean. So how can we straighten this image out? And here's a trick that I found many years ago, and I still use it today. Okay, now that I know there's some straightening tools in here and stuff like that, I don't know. I only know the ones that I've been using for years. And the one I've been using for years is the one where you draw a line using the ruler tool. And so let's count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down on the toolbar inside of Photoshop here. Hold my left mouse down. It opens up where the eyedropper is. We don't want the eyedropper. We want the ruler tool, the one that says ruler tool. Once I choose the ruler tool, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line along a straight part. Like, let's say you want a line. I'm going to draw a line using the left mouse. I'm going to draw it straight down the middle of this lighthouse. It's going to be on an angle because you can see I'm drawing a line right down the middle of the lighthouse, and I'm going to let my left mouse up. So I drew a line along the kind of the angle of the image I'm trying to straighten. So I drew a line right down the middle of the lighthouse using the ruler. Then I'm going to go underneath Image, Rotate Image, and I'm going to say Arbitrary. And what that does is Photoshop has recognized that you have drawn a line with the ruler tool, and it has put in an angle 2.89. And it's going to say you want to rotate clockwise. So it's smart. It's saying, hey, you're going to want to rotate this image clockwise by 2.89% angle. And if I hit OK, watch what happens. It straightens out my lighthouse. Now, of course, you're going to run into problems where look at the edge of the image. You'll see I'm going to have to crop out the rest of it. But at least my lighthouse now is straight. We could also do that with the flag. Let me undo that. Let's go over. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. The same image. I'm going to move it over, and you can see the flag. Same thing with the flagpole. Notice how the flag is on an angle. It doesn't look good. So if I want to straighten this photo out, again, I'm going to use the ruler tool, and I'm going to draw a line along the flagpole. I'm going to do it right down the middle of the flagpole. Then I'm going to go under Image, Rotate Image, and I'm going to choose Arbitrary. Photoshop is smart. Oh, this one's a little bit more of an angle. You can see it here. It says it wants to rotate 3.76 clockwise. And say, let's hit OK. And the flagpole should be straight. And the lighthouse is kind of straight too. It might be a little bit too much, but you'll notice it rotated the whole image so that the flag now is straight up and down. So what I would do to make this image even better then is use the crop tool. This is the crop tool right here. We're going to use this one a lot. I use it every day probably. And I'm going to draw the box. I'm going to see, this is called the crop tool. It gives you little squares that go around the outside, and I can shrink down my images. And basically what I'm trying to do is cut out the white part that's around the outside. So I shrink down the box till it's about the right size. Now, of course, in the classroom we don't have this little checkbox in our version, because this is a new version of Photoshop. I have this little checkbox. So after you do the crop, you just go back to the Move tool, which is the very top one right here, and it's going to ask you, hey, do you want to crop this image? I'm going to say yes, crop. And there, we got a straightened photo, a straightened lighthouse, a straight flagpole. And of course we could even make this image even better by adjusting maybe some of the things that we've already learned. Maybe the curves. We can even go down on curves there. Look at it, make the sky a lot darker. And then, yeah, no, that's not going to work. But hey, you can maybe do a slight adjustment there. That looks a little bit better. Bring out some detail in the ground using a little curves. So practice the curves. Practice straightening a photo using the ruler. That's a good one. Okay, let's continue. A couple other things I should know in Photoshop besides color correcting, and that, of course, the cropping that we just talked about. I'm going to open up this product. So let's just say I have this fabulous piece of pottery, and I am going to put it on my website and whatever. And on my design, it says it needs to be 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. Square, and so right now it's not square. It's probably not 1,000 by 1,000 pixels at 100 dpi. How about we use that? So we want this image to be 1,000 pixels across by 1,000 pixels down at 100 dpi, and then we'll color correct it a little bit. So how can we do that? Well, first we can do the color correcting. Again, I would probably use levels. This is a pretty good photo, but I kind of want the background to be white, and right now it's kind of a little off-white. It's kind of grayish. I don't know. It's kind of off-white. So how can I make the background white? Probably the easiest way to do that is to use the levels again. And so if I go underneath Image, Adjustment, Levels, you'll notice in the Levels tool, we've been using this already. Again, you see the histogram is over here towards the white area because most of it's awful bright compared to some of the images we used. But this is the one I'm going to use. I'm going to use the eyedropper. There's a black eyedropper, a middle gray eyedropper, and then there's a white eyedropper. I use this eyedropper right here. It's at the very end of the tool here. And I'll go over and click on the screen, and when I'm clicking on a screen, I'm telling Photoshop, hey, this is what I want to be white. So if I want the background to be white, again, I choose the eyedropper that's all the way on the end, and I'm going to click on the background, and it'll then select the white back there and make it brighter. And now, of course, it's blowing out the color for my my teapot here. So it's probably not the greatest way because it's a little bit too overexposed, but it was an idea. You can see. I'm going to leave it like it is. I just wanted to point out this is a really useful feature. I use it all the time. I'm going to hit cancel. That's probably not the best way right there, but that is one way to make white. So let's crop. So I'm going to use the crop tool, and again my designer says to me, hey, I need this photo to be 1,000 by 1,000 pixels at 100 dpi. So this is the crop tool right here. I can come up here to, there's some options at the top up here. I'm going to type in 1,000 PX. Make sure you put a PX in there. It thinks you're going to do 1,000 inches. I'm going to put in another 1,000 PX, and then I'm going to put in what the DPI, or the resolution, and that's going to be 100 DPI. So then I'm going to come over to the screen, and I'm going to move my window around so that my image looks good. And you might have to make the crop windows a little smaller, move it around a little bit. That looks pretty good right there. So again, this is going to be 1,000 by 1,000 pixels at 100 pixels per inch. When I'm all done doing the cropping, again, my version of Photoshop, I have a little checkbox here. The classroom version doesn't have that checkbox, so I have to click on the Move tool up here and then say crop. And there it is. If I zoom in, you see I got a nice 1,000 by 1,000 pixel image at 100 DPI, and now I'm going to save it. We could save this for, again, PNG or JPEG under File, Save As, and you have your JPEG or PNG. Those are the two I'd probably put on a website. And then we call it Teapot, and I'm going to save it as a PNG, and I'm going to put it on a website. So that's probably the most useful use of the crop tool, is to make things the exact size you need them to be. So in interface design, you're going to be asked to make things that are exactly pixel perfect, and the crop tool is a good one that allows you to do that. Let's see if there was any other ones. Okay, let's do one more. We're going to change the color. So here's a nice drawing from last semester's Illustrator class. I'm going to open that up about using the crop tool now. So let's just say I really like this image, but I really wanted her bow and her hair to be yellow instead of red. So there's many different ways you can do that. Many different ways. Of course, last class we were looking at how to use the selection tools. Again, you have a magic wand tool where we could actually select the red like that. Again, it's called the magic wand. It's located underneath 1, 2, 3, 4 down. Magic wand tool. I could select the red bow, and then I can just go and choose a color. I'm going to go to, again, there's two color options in Photoshop. You have a top color and a bottom color. They're down here in the very bottom of the toolbar. If I click the top one, I can double click on it, and it'll give me the color picker. And so we're going to say, hey, I want to make hers golden. I want to make a golden bow. And so I'm going to choose a golden color for that color picker. Again, it's right here is the color option, just like you have in Illustrator or any of the programs, just by clicking on it, changing the color by clicking in here. Again, you can change the hue by this little triangle that goes up and down. Once I have the color I want, then I could fill that in with that color. There's a variety of different ways to fill in inside of Photoshop. Probably the easiest way that I found is under Edit, Fill. And so what it'll do is whatever I have selected, in this case I use the magic wand to select her bow. I can go under Edit, Fill, and then there's one at the very top that says Contents. You can say white, gray, black, history, pattern, content aware. It's a very popular one I use, but the one I really want is the golden color, which is the foreground color. Remember the color that we chose here down here, which is actually the foreground color. Of course, the one that's in the back is the white color, is the background color. So I'm going to choose foreground color, and then I'm going to hit OK, and you'll notice we have now a yellow bow. To deselect, if you don't want to see the marching ants anymore, you hit Command D on the keyboard and it deselects. So it looks pretty good. I mean, there's one area that I missed, kind of right here. You can see there's a pixel right there that didn't show up, and so how could I fix that? Zoom in. There's one pixel right there that's kind of messed up there. I might just cheat a little bit. Let me try my paintbrush. There's a paintbrush tool right there, and let's just go over that. There we go. Woo! There we go. Fixed it. Still a little red in there. There we go. Okay, I use a little paintbrush. So there we go. A nice yellow bow. So again, using selection tool, filling in with colors, edit, fill. So I need you to practice those things, selecting an area, filling it in with a color, changing colors of things. Try all these adjustments, levels, curves. I didn't even go over some of these other ones. Boy, there's a lot of them in there, but you should know how to use the crop tool a lot. That's very important, very, very important that you learn the crop tool. and making sure you make pixel perfect images, and then color correcting. And hopefully this gives you a kind of a basic understanding. I will give you some files that you can work with.